Welcome to the On Your Mind podcast, where we believe mental illness can be temporary and transformative. Stay tuned for innovative, effective tools from experts in the field of mental health. Hosted by Timothy J. Hayes, psychologist. This podcast aims to change the narrative around mental illness. Move from a place of fear to a place of hope and solutions. Here on Your Mind.
Mark Hattas is an entrepreneur, author, and optimal being mentor, supporting optimal living, executive excellence, and organizational resiliency. Mark co-founded Journey's Dream. Rex Montague Bauer is also an optimal being mentor and co-founder of Journey's Dream and the director of product and program development, as well as an executive mentor. All right, well, welcome, Mark and Rex. It's a delight to have you join us today. Thank you for taking the time to be with us.
You bet. Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Dr. Tim.
The Journey's Dream podcasts this past year have focused a lot on individual and family mental health issues, and I know that you're doing a lot with taking the optimal being tools into the workplace, and I was hoping you could share with us how this fits and what you're doing in that exciting arena.
Yeah. So to give a little bit of history, I had built and sold a tech company and then went through my own mental health transition, if you will. And thankfully, I'm on the other side of it. And in the beginning of that, as I started to learn the principles that make up the Optimal Being program, there was a strong inspiration that came that we need to be teaching these in the workplace. These are core, fundamental tools and resources that leaders can benefit from. And I remember in 2012, I put together an early pilot stage of it and brought it to my old company and their leaders, and they liked it for themselves personally and said, yeah, but it's not ready. And I was disappointed, and I called Rex and said, hey, what would you think of joining me and working together? And Tim, you became part of that at one point as well, where we were really collaborating, like, hey, how does this stuff get out into the world in a way that can really support employees and a workforce? The big aha that came for me was as we worked with leaders and saw highly statistically significant results, we kind of had this organizational sense that we have an opportunity to present organizational resiliency, mental, emotional, cognitive performance, really supporting people being on, like really on in their life. And not just on for work, but to be on fully so that they can navigate through the bumps in the road or even significant challenges in life and have a tool set, that can support organizational resiliency, coming into alignment as team members, as people who are responsible for running that organization. And I'll close with this before we go on to the next piece. One of the things that had really struck me as a leader were the people who were significantly struggling. Now, there are people who manage through, right? That's kind of the American way in a lot of respects, that people kind of push through. And it's becoming more and more common that we have a responsibility as leaders to recognize when someone's pushing through and say, hey, whoa, let's pause. Let's look at what else could be supportive of you so that you're not bearing the burden, and dragging forward all this stuff into the workplace from your home or from the past, either in work or in yourself. Like, let's get it to a place where someone can really be on target. And there are memories that I had of a few people in the tech company I ran who really struggled, and I didn't understand it at the time. And this was 10 plus years ago. But we had one gentleman, he couldn't function, and multiple, people came to me and said, "What's going on with him?" And I asked him, he said, "Well, his doc was changed his medications." And there was another woman really struggling. We had a suicide, and there were these dynamics. It's like, wow, how do I deal with these as a leader? And more and more, I realized the way to deal with these as a leader is to understand tools and principles that we teach in the Optimal Being program and bring them into the workforce so that it becomes common to work through dynamics. Not to become a mental health professional clinic in the workplace, because that's not it. There are resources out there for that are much deeper. But to get the core basics and to create an environment of resiliency and support right there in the office.
Wonderful. It reminds me of the way Gabor Mate talks about everybody who's interacting with people should have a trauma-informed approach. They don't need to be trauma therapists, but they need to have kind of a roadmap that'll let them see what kinds of warning signs might indicate the need for a referral to somebody, or adding a resource, or giving personal space. And that sounds like just exactly what you have going here with the Optimal Being program.
It was so interesting, Tim, because my, adventure kind of took a different road than what Mark was just explaining. I was involved in corporate, and that was a big part of my life. But what I learned is that, and how I got involved, and Mark invited me in and said, "Hey, let's do this." And we've been doing it ever since. The experience I had was, we spent 40 years personally working with the principles that we teach in the Optimal Being program. And I interacted with it in my daily life, with my family, with, my cohorts in my business, and so forth. And what I found was, one day we woke up with my son in a mental health crisis, and incredibly difficult circumstances. And you were very much around during that time, and you're very aware of that. And all of a sudden, all the tools and everything that we learned as a family were put to a full test. And we came away from that experience after 4 years. Journey was an exceptional student at University of Michigan, and he basically got attacked and beat up, and may have had some brain injuries, and never was, determined. But he ended up, after 4 years of in and out of hospitals, stepped off a 6-story building, and his life ended. And what happened is, there was such a profound realization on many levels, in many ways, that, my goodness, I knew the tools. We lived the tools. Our family lived it. How many other families that are made up, that are out there working in business, like you just said, Tim, that don't have the trauma tool set? They don't know how to interact with it and engage it. And all of a sudden, it was like, I felt a renewed passion to work with developing this program. And that's why we did it together. Not the only reason, but one of the main reasons is that we want to make sure that all the families, leaders, wherever they are, will be a part of a family. They're a part of a system that they're engaged with. And if they don't have tools, they don't get the results of finding the joy that they're capable of having, and also experience the things that they need to when issues surface. And we were so surprised that we weren't able to just move right through it gracefully and easily with Journey. And it was such a awakening that says, wait a minute, one, I need a better refinement of my own experience with the tools. And what better way to do it than, create a program that's going to use all the tools as the basis to do so. And two, make sure that when I show up, I'm able to maintain the integrity of what we call the optimal being. So I wanted to add that as well, because it's a different angle that I approached it from. And it was obviously heart-wrenching, and it's part of the reason we, co-founded Journey's Dream and introduced Journey's Dream to the world.
So when you're looking at the tools and you're bringing these tools that were essentially developed for individuals to work on themselves and within their families, what have you done to make them more accessible to the corporate world?
Yeah, there's quite a few dynamics there, but I'm really going to focus on technology. So when we first began delivering these, everything was live, and we were limited to a group of about 12, 15 people to deliver them, and we repeatedly delivered those live sessions over the years. And in 2018, we actually partnered with a crew that filmed everything and edited the whole program. It took us about a year to film everything and edit it and get it in a technology that was accessible. And then it took another 8 months or so to really refine that, to get it so that it can be scalable for an organization. And so now it's such that an organization can come in and we can start with the initial assessment, and this assessment's really powerful. It measures essentially 10 areas of what we call elements of well-being that define someone's personal code. And I'll get into that if you'd like, for Rex can, but essentially in summary, they get this pre-assessment, learn the top 3 areas of focus, use those throughout the tool. And as they go into the tools, there are live components and digital components. So they're watching videos, they're reading, it's interactive, they're getting texts, they're getting some phone calls once in a while. It's really well designed and structured such that in a 16-week period, someone's going to go from not being aware of these tools to really having a degree of mastery. And I love using the Karate Kid. I know not everyone likes this, but the Karate Kid story of the wax on, wax off with Mr. Miyagi. And it's very much like that, that it's an objective-based, principle-based process that one all of a sudden realized, like, oh, that tool I learned in week 2, is carrying with me. And I see how that works with weeks, 3, 4, 5, 6, et cetera, all together as these tools work in harmony and support, and they become really second nature, but it's really been well designed. We had a powerfully skilled instructional designer, Paul Rapicki, work with us to design this thing so that it really works effectively inside an organization. We've assessed the languaging and made sure that it really meets the needs of all types of individuals from all types of background, and supports resiliency, of really coming back online. And so we're seeing consistency, which is really key for a program like this, to be able to see consistency of change. And everyone's going to have their own experience, and it's gentle enough where we're not going into deep trauma stuff in the workplace. We're working with work-related things. In fact, there's a COO of an organization that I've been working with, and he's in, there's 9 modules, and he's in module, I think he just finished module 7. And every time we have a conversation, he says, Mark, it's like you designed this for me. Every time I go into a module, it's the perfect timing. And he described how 4 companies have been coming together on a major challenge, and they have been blaming each other. And it went south really, really quickly. And he said, Mark, I used all these tools to make sure he was online as a leader, but then use the tools to help reorient the groups so that they were working forward together rather than living in the past of the blame of how they got into the situation. It was just a transformative thing that would have potentially led to complete disaster had they not had the intervention at that moment. So it's little tiny moments like that, which lead to resolution of challenges that otherwise could grow into monumental things and cost dearly, you know.
Well, and the thing I like about what you're saying there is that you're teaching the people who are already in the business, in the organization, sometimes from the top down, and giving them the tools. So when the intervention is needed, it's not some outside foo-foo expert coming in trying to tell people. It's somebody who's right in the middle of it, on the ground, can check in with themselves, realize they're not following what they know they've learned is one of the best paths they could take. And then when they get their own behavior and responses online, it has that ripple effect through their interactions with the others and through their organization. If I understand it correctly, when you first began this, the idea was to do it from the top down. Is that still do you try and get the leadership on board, have them go through the program and then have employees sign on?
Yeah, I would say the biggest impact that an organization is going to have is if the leadership goes through it. I mean, just bar none. I mean, yes, we can work with individuals who are going through a hard time or groups that might be struggling as a group. And if the leaders go through it, they set the tone for the rest of the organization. And now they have the principles and tools that they want everyone to, be tuned into and really applying with each other. So example, and the leader needs to really do something. And if they're going to bring this into the organization, they have to do it to really have it carry through and be long lasting. I mean, this particular individual I'm talking about, imagine how easy it would be for him now to say, hey, you guys, did you see how easy that was? And we've been through it when it was not easy. Well, I'd like to introduce you to the program that I learned where I found the tools that I used with you guys. Would you like to learn them? And now it becomes more of an integrity thing that they're saying, oh yeah, that's what you used? Oh, cool, I want to learn that. And it becomes kind of an opportunity for easy entry into the organization. It can also go through HR leaders. So either the leadership, it can go through an HR leader, the combination, but it needs to come in at the top of the organization to be truly effective.
We've had experiences on a pretty regular basis, at least with one or two corporations we worked with, where the leader really loved it, wanted to do it, and even one went through the program kinda, but didn't really apply the tools. And what happens is that the staff gets excited and starts working with the principals and the tools. And if the leader's not engaged, when things start getting a little dicey, then that's inevitable. What happens, in life, stuff comes up. And when that happens, the leader isn't saying, hey, let's go to the tools. And what happens is that the tools have a tendency, and the program seems to take a second place, and it doesn't stay in the forefront that's important. And it's not really about the program, it's about the principles that we share with the staff. And when those principles are live in the leader, whatever's going on, they're going to draw back and fall back on those principles. And the times we've noticed when they don't, it just falls away. And so we've had quite a bit of a different experiences, and those leaders that engage, wow, remarkable results with the staff and resolution of issues in a much easier manner. And the other thing I want to mention is when we were designing it, what was so important to us is that make sure we had the languaging that allowed a person to have whatever philosophy, whatever religion, whatever, theology or anything that they came from, their belief structure. We offered it in a language that was neutral and didn't polarize anyone on any level, which allowed them to be more open. So it's beautiful because we can go across the board anywhere in the world under any religion, and the principles apply. And it's exciting there as well, because now there's less resistance to learning the principles and the tools. So those are a couple of things I wanted to mention.
Yeah, and as you're saying, Rex, with the principle, one of the things that from my experience, makes this work different from a lot of others is instead of just holding up a principle, this program provides specific tools that allow the power behind those principles to have a deep impact in people's lives.
Yes, exactly. Thank you.
So how are people finding out about this? Where are you getting your exposure and your traction? What's your target audience?
So right now, our target audience is companies that have anywhere from 20, 30 employees all the way up to 400 or 500. So that's kind of the or groups. It could be a much bigger company with groups that we can bucket into those sizes. We actually, so for the first time ever, we hired a sales consultant who came on board back at the end of, right at the end of the year, beginning of 2021. And he's been bringing meetings. In fact, we have tomorrow, I think I've got, 4 or 5 meetings. So we just started really marketing. Before that, it was word of mouth. It was our network and word of mouth. And then people who graduated would tell others like, oh, you need to be aware of this, or a leader would go through and the leader would bring it in, for, more of their team. But we're at the early stages of the scaling, if you will, like getting into more people's hands. So we have been really quite fortunate to have the level of leadership, entrepreneurial kind of folks go through it to help us move it in a direction to where it is now. So it's really at a quite refined level that it works, it's consistent, the results are there, and it's now just a matter of continuing to grow. We've got a great team of facilitators and program guides and our call center, and it's our tech team. So we've got a really nice team that's come together to be able to support the execution of this. So it's early in the process of the moving it into the marketplace, but really we are looking right now for 5 key companies that have a significant number of resources that would take their whole core, starting with their leadership team, but then take the rest of their organization over time through the program.
All right. Well, people love stories, and let me throw this out for either one of you to answer. A success story. Mark, you hinted at one earlier. Whet people's appetite. What's a success story you've had in the corporate world with your Optimal Being program?
I've got 2 that I'd like to share. And the first one, we had a client who brought us in, and I remember meeting with Rex and Paul, and I met with the leadership. And they were very concerned because they had some employees that weren't good fits. But it had become such a family-oriented culture, they didn't want to just let people go. So they thought, well, hey, let's bring in the Optimal Being program, and maybe these people will change, and come online with their core philosophy and move forward with them. And one of the things that occurred was they went through the whole program, and the couple of key employees that they were struggling most with left. And they were doing the program and stuff, but they left. And one of the things that we find is that there's a resonance of an organization, just like there's the law of resonance in people, but there's a resonance in an organization, and they were operating in a functionally tolerating dysfunction. And they elevated to a level where they were really saying, hey, we're going to operate and function more like the way they wanted to. And when those employees realized that they were serious about it and they were following through on it, they didn't fit anymore. It was, and they knew it. So instead of going through a process of, possibly firing them or having someone who didn't fit in the organization, the employees left, And the replacement, the people that came in behind them, actually, one of them is doing the same job as the previous person, but part-time. And they're happier, and they're more productive. And so like really good results are happening there.
And they're fitting into the corporate culture better.
They're totally fitting in. And the other one is a replacement of role, or, it was a tech role, and they have a new person. And again, just they hired because they attracted someone who fit with what they, determined they wanted to become from a really conscious place, which is one of the things that happens here is people become really conscious of, well, wait, what do we want as an organization? Are we allowing for what we want to come forward, or are we tolerating things that block what we want from being realized? And as that starts to strip away, it's as if, the organization reorients to attract the right resources, and the leaders are able to really function at their highest levels. So before I share the second story, I'll give Rex an opportunity to share something.
Yeah, because that was really exciting to see. We've seen it enough to realize that when the culture itself shifts and the leaders shift their approach to how they interact in the world of their business and in their lives and so forth, it becomes effortless. That's so important because there's so much effort. There was so much stress and effort to try to keep these people. and they didn't. And we remember, well, what's your main issues? 1, 2. And they named them. And they didn't have to engage with them and say, well, we're going to have to let you go. It was an effortless process that the individuals realized they weren't a good fit. And because the culture shifted and upgraded to a different way of doing business, and the people that came in, like Mark was just describing, was in another process of effortless. They just showed up, and it was really cool how the stories are. We won't get into it because then we'd be getting a little too personal with the company. But how the stories came in is, well, this person just kind of called one day and said, hey, I heard about your company, and bam, they get an interview and they're a perfect fit. I mean, so we either struggle with life, and in business, we either struggle with trying to push things forward, or we show up and allow it to unfold from a place of conscious awareness and intention, Mark. And when you shared about that, the difference there, when they developed their clear intention, and we did a system with this company that is a visioning type process that they were just blown away with. They said they'd never had anything like that. They've been in business for almost 20 years. And they said it just transformed everything, and it set the tone for this massive cultural shift. And when you talk to the owners and the staff now, they just love working together. So there's lots more with it, but that's just to give a really encapsulation.
Well, and that's, it's a wonderful thing, because a lot of people especially in our culture and certainly in our families, we come to the idea that we can't ever let anything go or have an ending. We've got to stay and stay and stay. And, Henry Cloud wrote that book, Necessary Endings, and it somewhat relates to the personal relationships, but he directs it mostly at the corporate world, and story after story, similar to the one you're telling. When you get yourself aligned, when you don't tolerate those things that are dragging you down or dragging the company or corporation down, it becomes pretty obvious that maybe this person isn't a good fit, and it's a better thing for everybody, including the person who's let go, to acknowledge they're not a good fit for that company or for that position. And with the tools that you have in the Optimal Being program, you can do that in such a straightforward, respectful way that it's a blessing to everyone.
It is. So another, and people have gone through the program, and there's entrepreneurs. We've got a top selling, number one best selling rap artist and actress, and there are people that get benefit from going through the program in all walks of life. But one in particular I want to emphasize, and the role of the entrepreneur is really interesting. So being an entrepreneur, that's near and dear to my heart. But Rex and I work with leaders. And so it's not always that someone says, hey, I'm looking to bring an optimal being type program in. It's often the leader looking for executive mentoring and coaching. And so one of the dynamics that happens when we are in that aligned state is that we attract, and we mentioned that in the last story, but we teach principles and tools to support leaders being in the aligned state to attract what they most want. And so I know Rex has a story too, but one of the things that I was just blown away, and I experience awe with these tools nearly on a daily basis. But someone I hadn't spoken with in 15 years, and I didn't know him that well. I met him a few times, but I get a LinkedIn request, and he says, hey, you were in my dream last night, and the message in the dream was to find Mark Hattas. And he said he had dreams, since he was 16, where he would have prophetic dreams at times, but he said only twice in his life had he gotten a first and a last name. So he listened and he reached out. So turned out he had built and sold 3 different companies, and the value of those combined companies were in the hundreds of millions of dollars. And he had a new organization that was a few years in the making, and he's got a vision that's huge, but he was recognizing he needed some support. So we begin working together, and very, very quickly, as he's going through this, he realizes where some of the blocks are, some of the things that are really keeping him tied to past situations, not allowing for his vision to move forward. And it was funny because we had one session, and he texted me the weekend after, or the Monday or the weekend after, and he said, Mark, you wouldn't believe what happened. So right after, he gets 3 calls for funding. Somebody that was, a really critical hire comes through, and all these things just start landing. And what we've experienced in working with leaders is there's a consistent forward progress at an accelerated pace. And the person's doing the work. We're stewarding the teaching of and the practicing of and helping people realize hey, you have these tools, we can fish for you, but really we want to teach you so that you can, do it on your own. And so the executive, the entrepreneur oftentimes wants to start with a mentoring coaching relationship, because then they get deep into how does this apply to me? But what we're doing in those sessions is we're really using the core tools and principles until they get to a level where now they're ready. Okay, let's bring it in for other people. So there's successes in the program, and there's successes in the mentoring of leaders that go along with the program. That's critical as well.
I had another story real briefly. Also working with a business owner, and he started in our program. We worked together, and Mark actually introduced us. And so he started with a program and just loved it. And he was having all sorts of dynamic challenges with his business partner. And so he and I just really hit it off for the program. And then once he finished the program, he just felt like he wanted to do more. And so we started doing our private work together and our mentoring. Well, together, he was able to resolve the patterns and the things that were happening in him that he wasn't able to see in regards to how and why he would attract a partner that had the behaviors and the personality that he did. And by resolving that within himself, he decided, I don't want to do this business with his partner anymore. And they set up a buyout. And he went through a very successful, it was a multi-million-dollar company, went through a very successful selling of his partnership and came away with a really, nice settlement. And now he's adventuring into a new company. He's got the ideas down and we're continuing our work together. And the beauty of that is, again, Mark, you nailed it, because it isn't about Mark or I or the program even. It's about what the individual does and applying the tools and the principles into their daily life. Because what most people think is their problems at work originate at work. And what the actual truth is, and I know you know this, Tim, is that the challenges a person has originates within us. And we interact with it at home and we interact with it at work, and we go wherever we go, we take them with us. Well, as he's refining it, our work just keeps expanding. And he has gotten to a place now where the people he's attracting just want to have fun. They want to be successful. And so they will be. And I'm really excited. And this is kind of what part of the vision Mark and I have in our company, Tim, is that the new business world that's coming is a business world that is functioning based on love, the core principle of our program. The optimal being that we represent is the being of pure love that we truly are. And some people go, well, that's a little mushy or something. No, it's real basic. We're an optimal being that's functioning in the world from a place of something less than who we truly are. And when we function in the world from something less than who we truly are, then we get less than optimal results. But when we shift to be in alignment, and we've said that in the interview quite a few times, and what are we in alignment with? We're in alignment with what we call the optimal being. And what we call the optimal being is the pure essence of love, not the love that the person might think or they're in love with someone. But if you imagine a newborn baby or a puppy or a kitten, and you hold that infant and you look into their eyes, and you get a sensation and an experience of awe, and you see they're just loving, you would say, well, they are loving me or I'm loving them. But the essence of what they're doing is a state of being. That's what we call the optimal being. And I also want to make sure we do a shout out to Dr. Michael Rice. And I know you work with him on a regular basis. He's been an amazing teacher and mentor. And he has been at the foundation of everything that we do in our program is Michael's teachings that he spent a better part of his life, creating and putting together. And Michael, you can learn about Michael at whyagain.org. So I wanted to make sure that we mentioned that. And he's amazing. I love the man. I've known him now for almost 47 years, and I started studying with him over 40 years ago. And we are blessed to have him really supporting what we're doing in the world, in the world of business.
So I'm getting the sense that the Optimal Being program is giving people tools to turn any negative emotional state into part of a corrective guidance system, tools for communicating more effectively, resolving conflict, and removing any kind of internal emotional blockage that would prevent them from, reaching a higher level of success. And as I mentioned earlier, one of the things I really like about this program is that it actually has those tools. So you've got those principles, you've got the base recognition of our true nature as a spiritual being, etc. But you have the specific tools to help let that have a direct impact in your life. I'm aware of our time here, and I just want to throw it open and ask for either one of you, what's something we haven't even touched on yet you want to make sure you put out there when people are thinking about the corporate world and how Optimal Being and their set of tools might be a nice addition to their toolkit?
So what comes to mind for me, and the opportunity that we have, is to look for entry points into a person's life. And so when we can find an entry point through like a podcast like this, or through a book. We have a new book that's going to be coming out. The working title is The Awakened Workforce, and it's in the editing stage. But it's going to walk through, these 10 elements that we measure and move through in the program. And so that's going to be an entry point. There are many that we've created. And in Journey's Dream, one of the big benefits is we've got an opportunity to have outreach into a corporate environment. And we can meet people there so that we can support having these tools lead to thriving. And Journey's Dream also has then deeper resources and access to practitioners. So if someone's really struggling and it's, needing some further intervention, there's deeper access. So it's a kind of all-inclusive resiliency program to say, hey, we can work with your top thriving executives. And when they have a bump in the road, we can work with them there. And these tools apply, equally well there. And even if people have been struggling for a while, these tools are extremely effective. It was really part of the roadmap that I used that led me to, full restoration to health after I went through my mental health crisis. But there's also then some of those deeper resources in the podcast, in the practitioner network, and some of the other tools that are at journeysdream.org. So I wanted to emphasize that, there's lots of different ways that someone can come and be approached to this. So if you're wondering like, hey, how do I get more? Or what if we have people that are really at the far end of struggling? There's lots available, in that world of Journey's Dream.
I also wanted to add, Mark, that was excellent. Thank you. The experience of when some people get exposed to our program at first, or us, they think because, we're experiencing in our public setting, we're on our best behavior, right? But in another moment, we might be reacting to something and having a difficult time. And so sometimes people believe or think that the program is designed to, we are supposed to be joyous all the time. Well, that's just horse manure. We aren't supposed to be anything. What we are is pure love. And when we forget who we are, then we engage in the world in a reactive manner. And the key to our program is you experience your joy more fully. You experience your sadness and your pain more fully. You experience whatever it is, fully living as an optimal being doesn't mean that you're always in joy. It means that you have some anger that comes up or experiences in the world. Whatever it is, you have the tools and the methods, and you have developed the skill through going through the process to be able to navigate it and to be able to realign with the being that you are. Not to avoid something that might not be pleasant, but to embrace it. And the more one does that as an individual, and then they represent that in their company, the company reflects it back. The individuals want to know what's going on. And if the leaders are doing it, the employees are going to go, wow, what are you doing? You are seeming so different to me. And so I wanted to emphasize that this isn't a feel-good program. There's a lot of feel-good programs out there. This program is a program that helps people understand who they really are, connect with their internal guidance system, restore themselves to their true beingness, and live fully in every moment and create more joy in the world while being able to embrace everything that may not look just like that.
Understood. Well, thank you both. It's exciting for me to, as you mentioned, to have been around in the beginning to see that things are progressing. And I look forward to that book, whatever the end title tends to be, and to having you guys back in 6 months or so to talk about what's the status and what's new on the horizon for the Optimal Being program in the workplace.
And I should mention, Dr. Tim, the website is optimalbeing.live. So optimalbeing, BEING.live. You can get there through journeysdream.org as well, but there's a direct site for the program too.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for being here, both of you. It's a delight to talk to you again, and I'll look forward to catching up in about 6 months.
Thank you, Dr. Tim, and appreciate all your support that you've given us throughout this process and also what you're doing for Journey's Dream. You're a blessing, and we appreciate you massively.
You're quite welcome and deserving.
As are you. Thank you.
Take care. Rex Montague Bauer, co-founder and director in product and program development and executive mentor, brings to the Optimal Being team 16 years of experience in sales, marketing, and executive management. Realizing that true fulfillment comes from following one's innate wisdom and internal guidance, he left his corporate position to pursue his dream of supporting himself and others in true transformation. Hundreds have benefited from Rex's guidance and support as a facilitator, mentor, and directional advisor. After devoting the past 38 years to mastering a unique set of tools, he led the design and development of the Optimal Being program, available at optimalbeing.live, and serves as the lead instructor. Rex uses his vast experience and abilities to identify strengths as well as specific areas of challenge for individuals and organizations. This empowers them to accomplish their goals effectively and efficiently. He inspires a sense of clarity and confidence that supports fulfillment of an organization's vision for and manifestation of an awakened organization. When his son Journey Shea was diagnosed with a mental illness and died 4 years later, Rex was motivated with renewed passion to uplift and support anyone struggling with mental health challenges. This life-changing personal experience inspired Rex to co-found the Hattas Shea International Foundation and Journey's Dream, journeysdream.org. Mark Hattas is an entrepreneur, author, and Optimal Being mentor, supporting optimal living, executive excellence, and organizational resiliency. Mark co-founded Journey's Dream, a support hub sharing the path to sustained mental health, journeysdream.org. He also co-created the Optimal Being program, optimalbeing.live, and a powerful workforce solution supporting people living optimally. Prior to this, Mark started, built, and sold a $20 million revenue tech firm over a 12-year period. He is an international best-selling author and has significantly contributed to the boards of IC Stars and Charles Tillman's Cornerstone Foundation. Mark began his career in GE's technical leadership program following earning an engineering degree at Marquette University. Mark believes every human has a right to live their optimal life, and he is here to support all in doing this. Mark is sharing this adventure of life with his wife Liz and their 5 children.
You've been listening to the On Your Mind podcast, offered by Journey's Dream, where we support people through mental health challenges to a place of true and lasting well-being. If you love our show, we invite you to visit onyourmindpodcast.org to join the conversation, access the show notes, and discover our helpful resources. Thank you for listening.